I noticed it the first time in the smallest moments, the kind you pretend not to see because accepting them would mean accepting a painful truth. It was the way my wife's eyes softened when another man spoke, the way her smile arrived faster, brighter, as if it had been waiting for him all day. I stood there beside her, technically present, yet slowly becoming invisible in the space between them. At first, I told myself it was harmless, just social warmth, nothing more. But deep down, something inside me shifted, like a door quietly closing in a house I still lived in but no longer owned. The more I observed, the clearer it became that I was no longer the center of her attention, not even a corner of it. She laughed at his jokes with a kind of ease I hadn't seen directed at me in months. When I spoke, she nodded politely, but her mind had already drifted back to him. I started measuring my worth in those tiny reactions, each one cutting a little deeper than the last. I wanted to ask her about it, to confront the growing distance, but every time I tried, I swallowed the words before they left my mouth. Silence felt safer than the answer I feared. One evening at a gathering, everything crystallized in a way I could no longer deny. She stood across the room with him, completely unaware of how obvious they had become to me. She tilted her head when he spoke, smiling like the world outside that conversation didn't exist. I watched her the way you watch something you once knew by heart, but can no longer recognize. It wasn't loud betrayal, not yet, but it was enough to fracture something permanent inside me. In that moment, I realized I had already started grieving a relationship that was still technically alive. After that night, I stopped asking questions. I stopped searching her face for reassurance that no longer came naturally. Instead, I studied everything in silence, like a man decoding the end of a language he once spoke fluently. Strangely, I didn't feel anger at first, only a cold clarity. Love doesn't always explode. Sometimes it fades in silence, so quiet you only notice when it's already gone. I began to detach, piece by piece, without announcing it, without giving her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I decided that if I was being erased, I would not beg to stay written. At home, I became careful in a different way. I still smiled, still asked about her day, still played the role of the husband who hadn't noticed anything wrong. But inside, I was making decisions she knew nothing about. I started planning my exit not out of rage, but out of acceptance. There was something strangely peaceful about it, like stepping out of a room where the air had slowly become unbreathable. She never suspected a thing. To her, I was still there, still unchanged. But I was already halfway gone, living in a future she hadn't imagined yet. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or betrayal exposed in a dramatic scene. It came in a quiet moment when she smiled at me absent-mindedly, the same smile she once gave him freely, and I felt absolutely nothing in return. No jealousy, no sadness, just emptiness. That emptiness scared me more than anger ever could. It meant I had crossed a line inside myself without even realizing it. That night, I made my final decision. Not to fight, not to accuse, just to leave. Because sometimes the loudest statement you can make is silence followed by absence. The days after my decision were the calmest I had felt in a long time. I continued behaving normally, watching her move through life unaware that the foundation beneath us had already been removed. She talked about future plans, trips, little dreams she assumed I was still part of. I listened, nodded, even smiled when necessary. But every word she spoke confirmed what I already knew. I was no longer part of the version of her life she truly lived in her mind. I had become an accessory to a story that no longer included me. When I finally left, there was no argument, no dramatic confession. I simply packed what was mine and walked out while she was still inside the same home, living a version of normal that I no longer belonged to. She didn't understand at first. There was no warning for her, no fight to explain it. I chose it that way, because I knew she would try to fix what she only noticed once it disappeared. But by then, I had already accepted the truth she never saw coming, that I had been gone long before I physically left. Weeks passed, and I heard through others that she was confused, searching for answers I had deliberately not given. That was a consequence of silence. It leaves no explanation, only reflection. I didn't hate her. I didn't even blame her fully. People drift, love shifts, attention wanders. But what hurt most was realizing I had been standing in front of her for so long while feeling completely unseen. I didn't leave to punish her. I left because staying had become a slow disappearance of myself. In the end, she was left with silence where she expected a fight, absence where she expected forgiveness, and a truth she never saw coming. I didn't leave because I stopped loving her suddenly. I left because I finally stopped abandoning myself to stay where I was no longer valued. And as I close that chapter of my life, I realized something simple but permanent. Sometimes the quietest endings are the ones that echo the loudest afterward.